What's up, everybody? Coast to Coast podcast coming at you. And tonight, the conversation changes. The regular season and conference tournaments are done, and the NCAA tournament is revealed. It's about to begin with the official opening in Dayton on Tuesday night. Carolina enters March without their blue chip recruit and a very different roster than the one that started the season, but only in an identity sense. Tonight, we'll break down UNC's matchup against VCU, the structure of the region, and any realistic paths forward. Rob Harrington joins us first to analyze the bracket, look at UNC and how their draw fits and what Carolina needs to do to win games in this year's tournament. In the back half of the hour, Greg Barnes will join us to analyze the full bracket nationally, where the committee got it right, where the surprises are, and how the Tar Heels fit into this field. Y'all, the bracket is here. Let's get into it. Good evening, good day, good morrow, however you are getting us. If it's not live, I'm glad you're here. Almost 200 folks joining us in the YouTube chat this evening as we just saw the bracket. Undoubtedly, you're already tired of all the talking heads giving you all of their picks with no context whatsoever. We're going to do something different tonight. This is the Coast to Coast. We are delivered by Salvio's Pizza. I'm Joey Powell. You guys know, I actually got a message from IC's Leslie Nope, Michelle Hillison, the other day. She sent me a screenshot of her using the IC20 code at Salvio's and getting some deliciousness delivered to her house for her family. If it's good enough for Michelle, y'all, it's good enough for everybody. Salvio's is amazing. Michelle's a high-class individual. The fact that those two made it up for a dinner doesn't shock me in the slightest. I hope that you all will do the same. Games coming quick, and you know you're not going to leave the couch. Go ahead and hit Salvio's up. Let them deliver. SalviosPizza.com. Use the code IC20. Get 20% off any online order. Salvio's Pizza, delivering the coast to coast. Y'all, I'll go ahead and say it. We've got famous folks in the room tonight. Rob Harrington joins us. Rob, I don't think you've been with us since probably before the season started, or at least November-ish. Sherrell McMillan and Sean Moran, the bastions. That's bastions, not something else. Bastions of the show are here to give us as much analysis as you guys can possibly handle, and then some. So let's go first. The biggest thing that I want to throw out to you first, Rob, which seed lines jumped out at you, and which placements jumped out at you with regard to North Carolina, maybe and specifically in their bracket, and then we'll dive into the Tar Heels a little more.
I was pleased. I mean, the first thing to keep in mind is that when you're hanging out in the 6 seed range, you're going to have a tough path. It's just like 2022. I know everyone's instinct and the history is to look at worse or better matchups, and that still applies. But you're going to start playing really good teams really quickly. I thought under the circumstances, VCU is a good team. They're not as battle tested as Carolina, and I was pleased. Instead of getting one of the underachieving Power 5 programs that might pose more of a challenge personnel wise, I think a team without Caleb Wilson can do better against a mid-major probably than a P5. So from that point of view, I was happy. I don't think they'll be any more than probably a few points favorite because, again, you're a 6 seed, and those 6-11 games are tough. I was worried. It didn't happen, thankfully, but I was worried that as comeuppance for last year's inclusion, which was so controversial, of course, that the committee might say, hey, Caleb Wilson's gone. You bombed out against Duke. You flamed out against Clemson. You get dropped to a 7. They didn't do that. To their credit, I thought that Carolina earned a 6 seed. Even after Wilson went out, they won the 2 home games at least. Can they beat quality opposition away from home? That has been a reoccurring question throughout the year, but especially since January. So we'll see. But under the circumstances, at least to start off the first round game, I think they did okay.
You've got to be somewhat pleased if you're Tar Heel fans in the sense that they don't have to go very far. I'll admit when I was watching the reveal, I was scared to death they were going to get sent to San Diego or somewhere far west. And I think most of the folks that listen to this show, and maybe the ones watching right now, still have a little bit of PTSD from a trip to California earlier this season. So, guys, I think the first thing, let's talk specifically about Carolina, and I think we'll get a little bit more wide angle when Greg gets on with us later. But I think the biggest thing is, do you guys feel like North Carolina is where they were expected to be? I think Greg did a great job of couching that. Rob just touched on it a little bit. Sean, yes or no? Is this about what North Carolina gets with or without Caleb Wilson?
Well, with Caleb Wilson, you're potentially looking, I think, up to a 4 seed, depending on how they would have done. But I think more importantly, you're looking at what could have been a higher ceiling or opportunity versus being happy if they win one game in the tournament. But with Rob, I was a little worried they might drop down to a 7 based on how they did play for the most part against Clemson and not having Caleb Wilson going forward and getting dinged for that. But you did feel pretty safe with a 6. So it was a lot different than last year where you didn't think UNC was going to get in, and there was a surprise that there was a playing game. But yeah, I think in general, this is fair. If it was with Wilson, whatever that seed would have been, they weren't going to be a 1 or 2 seed. So to Rob's point, they would have been playing tough teams early, but the potential to beat those teams would have been much, much greater. And, the matchup problem posed would have been more significant versus Veesaar. So, he's going to get doubled no matter who the opponent is, and teams are going to force everybody else to try to beat you.
Sherrell, what do you think mattered the most for the committee in seeding North Carolina? There's been a lot of things that we've thrown out. There's been, injuries. There've been how many games they've played without their full starters. There's wins above bubble. There's the net. There's, all these different things that factored in. What do you think the main driver was for North Carolina seeding? And you're muted. I got nothing. Okay. Rob, I'm throwing that to you. We'll let Sherrell fix his audio again.
I'm back. I'm back.
There he goes.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
The
Come
other
on,
mute
bro.
button was
This
on.
is March.
My bad.
You got to be playing your best right now.
I'm tired. I'm kind of, never mind. I'm not going to say that.
Wow.
Yeah, I
Shame.
think it's really about the fact that they did beat 2 tournament teams, albeit at home, without Caleb Wilson. I think you're looking at, if you lose, I guess, the Clemson game or the Louisville game, you're probably looking at a 7 more than likely. But they did show themselves worthy, I guess, of a 6 seed by being able to beat tournament teams without Wilson. It's kind of funny. They were the number 22 overall seed according to the NCAA. So it's like, man, if they had Caleb Wilson and maybe they just one game is different, maybe they do hop up into a 5 seed because we can play hypotheticals, for whatever. But I think it's clear that maybe the committee saw the team in a better light than the metrics, and then a lot of us did, because 22, and that's without Caleb Wilson. I mean, it's been more than a month, so it's not like they built up this huge resume without him and then they're coasting off of that. This is a lot of the work. A third of the season was done without Caleb Wilson. So I think to me it's more about that they showed themselves capable of at least beating decent teams without him.
Rob, there's kind of this notion that you'd rather be a 6 because your second game, if you could win the first, is better than having to play better than having to play the situation if you're a 5, and definitely better if you're a 7. So I want to ask you, do you feel like the 6 probably suits this team, or does it not matter considering how Jekyll and Hyde they've been?
I would have wanted the highest seed they could possibly get, because I think this team will be doing extremely well to make the second weekend, and their best chance to do that would have been as high a seed as possible. I mean, yes, if you were injured and getting healthy for the tournament and you thought you really could make a deep run, of course, you'd rather not see a 1 seed in the final 16. So that's what you get as a 6 versus a 5. The problem is, of course, you get a number 3 seed in the second round as opposed to a 5-4 game. And I think those 3 seeds are pretty good. I mean, the Illinois is a rough matchup. They would have been a rough matchup with Caleb Wilson, but they're a top 10 team, and that's what you get when you're a 6 seed. I would love, I mean, when I look at the 5-12 games too, I think the 12 seeds this year are a bit weaker than they have been in the past. I wouldn't be surprised if all the 5 seeds win, actually, whereas Carolina has somewhat of an unknown in VCU. We know that they're solid, but they don't have the track record. But they could be better than we think. Whereas those 12s to me look a bit weaker than VCU is an 11. I would have wanted for this team as high a seed as possible. But as mentioned, I think a 6 seed is what they earned. Probably they would have gotten, at least they were on track to get a 5, maybe a 4 with Caleb Wilson, but at least a 5. So I think it could, in theory, it could be the difference. That injury could be the difference between making the second weekend and not. But to your point, Joey, I never saw this team as a contender. They haven't shown all year the type of dominance to suggest to me that they would be a Final Four type team unless they just got hot or there were a bunch of upsets or something like that. So I wasn't thinking about the third weekend. All along, I've been thinking about the second weekend.
Yeah, and there's a bigger conversation to be had about, is the second weekend the standard for North Carolina? Because I think most folks that have gotten used to this, this program over the years that follow it or that, cover it, that's typically not where North Carolina falls, but that's a different show for a different day. Sean, I want to throw out the KenPom numbers for VCU. What's crazy is if VCU doesn't win their conference tourney in the A10, they likely didn't make this field. I think that's, if you look at the way the seed lines popped out, they absolutely would not have made it had they not won their conference tournament. But if you look at VCU's KenPom profile, and we use KenPom here on the show. But Sean, I'm seeing a team that's 27-7. Their offensive rating is very similar to North Carolina's. If you look at their defensive rating, it's very similar to North Carolina's. Yeah, I mean, there's 20 positions or so in between them, but it's close, right? And it's kind of what you would expect with a 2.5 point line as you've seen right now. Strength of schedule, however, VCU's only played 4 Power 4 teams or Power 5 teams. I think they're all teams that North Carolina has seen as well. Virginia Tech. I'm sorry, North Carolina's not seen Vanderbilt, but it's NC State, Vanderbilt, and Virginia Tech. North Carolina's seen 2 of those 3. Sean, you tell me, looking at just the profile of this team, I don't want to get into the actual skill sets and the players yet, but just the profile of this team. What's the biggest thing that jumps out at you looking at VCU and how they match up with North Carolina on paper?
Well, just staying from a profile, the A10, I think they're rated number 7. UNC barely beat Dayton last year, so there's always some good teams that come out of the conference. VCU has been the hottest team in the conference, and it was shown, with how they ran through the A10 tournament. Granted, really going back to this calendar year, they have 3 losses, 2 to St. Louis, who they did not match up with, but they've been struggling, and then to George Mason in January. So they've been pretty much rolling since January. But I think to your point, Joey, to me, it's the 3-point shooting. They've been, really even over the last since February, top 50 from a 3-point shooting perspective, and they're not at Alabama where they're number 1, or Louisville where they're top 5 in terms of 3-pointers attempted per game, but they do get them up. And we know, how quickly just a few threes can change the tenor of the game, whether you have an 8-point lead or it's a tie game and you get 2 hits. So to me, that's the biggest, I think focus point for UNC when you're looking at VCU from an offensive perspective. Offensive rebounding, they're 114th on KenPom. So that means they focus on it, but they're not going to try to crush you like potentially Illinois or what we saw against Duke. And we know UNC struggled on the boards. And then, I think defensively, they're ranked number 60 over the last, once again, since February, number 30. So they're solid, but it's not going to be a Clemson Duke physical matchup, which we've seen the Clemson team twice now. So I think there is that opportunity. Not that UNC has really shown it, but I know we all have it in our heads, the ability for UNC to get up and down, or everybody to want for them to get up and down. And I think, especially with Phil Martelli Jr. and what he did at Bryant, the game might have a tendency to be sped up quicker than it would be to face a team that is trying to go, 28 seconds on the shot clock, work you defensively, and really play slow. So to me, offensively, it's a 3-point shooting. Defensively, it's a solid team, but it's one that I think UNC should have a better stylistic matchup with in this game.
Yeah, and Sherrell has shared with us, apparently there are some early reports that UNC will tip at 3:10 on Thursday. That's 3:10 on the East Coast. Sherrell, I saved this question just for you, man. Guard play, March. When you watch VCU, and I saw them play a little bit this weekend, Nick Lewis and Terrence Hill are absolute, I'm not going to call them the D word, but they are absolutely tenacious. And they have a ton of guys that don't play a huge load of minutes. Martelli Jr. does a great job of spreading it around in a sense that they have 7 guys that play 20 or more minutes, but nobody plays over like 27. But Terrence Hill and Nick Lewis, they're both young guards, but they're absolutely quick. They shoot free throws very well. The whole team, everybody in their starting 5 shoots better than 35% from 3. This feels like off of paper, this feels like an issue for North Carolina. Make me feel better or make me feel right, Sherrell?
Struggling. Honestly, man, I don't know. I can't sit here and tell you that I watched VCU a ton throughout the season. I've looked at their profile, watched their game against NC State back in, was that November? It feels like a different life ago. Saw a couple snippets from the A10 tournament over the weekend. Just looking at their profile, though, I like Sean said, it does seem to be a decent matchup for UNC, but I think the line that is there says a lot about what people feel about the two teams. And then Nick Lewis, he is someone that we know a decent amount about from Sean's neck of the woods. He actually was the AAU and high school teammate of Derek Dixon, so it's going to be pretty cool to see those two more than likely locked up against each other for significant portions of the game. They play beside each other.
And the point, sorry, you're probably going to get to it, but and the point guard making Dixon play the 2 guard on all those high school and AAU teams as well.
Yeah, so it was those two for Team Takeover, who, as people who follow this stuff, that's always one of the better grassroots programs because of their discipline, their style, and all that stuff. So I think Lewis actually is going to be a tough matchup for Dixon, but I think Dixon is going to be a tough matchup for Lewis because Lewis is of the shorter ilk.
He's a little guy.
He's listed as 6 foot. I don't think he's quite 6 foot. But that's a matchup that fascinates me. And then, of course, you stick Trimble on the other team's best perimeter player and hope for the best. I think the key is just for Carolina moving forward is going to be, it's not rocket science. It's going to be Henri Veesaar. Like he has to be maybe not 28 and 17 like on Friday, but he has to be like 20 and 10, I think, for them to beat VCU because it's going to be tough for other people to get off their shots. I mean, we saw it against Clemson. We've seen it over and over in that there's really only one player who can get into the lane consistently, beat his man off the dribble consistently, and that's Seth Trimble. And sometimes he can finish around the rim and sometimes he struggles. So to me, it's really about Dixon. That Dixon Lewis matchup is compelling, and then Carolina just finding a way to make sure that Veesaar has the ball again, just like the Randy ratio we talked about back in the day with Randy Moss. Like there has to be Veesaar touches almost every possession, and you have to play through him.
I don't know anybody named Randy Moss. I know Randy Moss, but I don't know any Randy Moss. Rob, something I'd love to hear your insight on. What kind of what kind of game does North Carolina want this to be? I think Sherrell did a great job of teasing matchups. He mentioned Veesaar. It should be noted as well that VCU's got a 6'11" post player from Eastern Europe as well, in Lazar Djokovic. But I want to ask you, Rob, what kind of game most favors North Carolina, or if North Carolina can make the game blank, then it will favor them?
I think they want to expose VCU the way they've been exposed by other teams. The thing about VCU is they draw a lot of fouls, and that plays into Carolina's advantage because Carolina's defensive scheme is designed not to foul. So that in theory, they shouldn't have a problem with that because as much as I gripe about drop coverage, that actually works to their advantage here because they're going to be playing contain rather than pressuring. If they aren't fouling VCU, some of the top VCU guys have fallen off hard against their best opponents. And so I think ideally they would sort of not give them anything easy, don't foul, and bait them into taking a lot of tough threes, at least contested threes. And I think, yes, it's scary when you allow top players to take a lot of threes in the tournament. What can happen. We remember Harold Arsenault, but that's the game that they want.
Too soon, Rob. Too soon.
I know, but they don't want to get into a free throw shooting contest. Obviously, not only because that's VCU's game, but that's such a sore spot for the Heels right now. I think you do your contained defense, take care of the ball, run when you can, and I think the superior overall talent level should be enough. I'm more optimistic about this game than the point spread or KenPom, because I think Carolina's defense actually projects better against VCU than it would be against someone else. If they get to Illinois, that will flip completely, because the Illinois can expose the worst parts, the weakest parts of Carolina's game. VCU can't really do that. So I feel pretty good about it, with all caveats, knocking on wood and everything else.
And just following up on that, I mean, obviously different tournaments, different teams, and the other previous Carolina teams went in with full health, but in their opening game, including the first four under Hubert Davis, the average margin of victory is 29 points, and they scored 90 or more points all three times. So I don't know if it's something that they're doing in between the ACC tournament and NCAA tournament to get ready, or if they're just, I think at Marquette, Caleb Love just had like 8 threes or 7 threes in the first half, and then against Wagner, they were a number 1 seed, and then against San Diego State, they were making everything. So I don't know if it's something they do or if just it's the way it's worked out, but they have shown a proclivity here in the last 5 years to really take advantage of these first round matchups.
You get points for using the word proclivity on a Sunday evening. Hey, shout out to the almost 700 of you that are watching us live. If you're listening to us later on in podcast form, we're still grateful. But either way, I'm talking to both audiences right now. Make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel and subscribe to IC Podcasts on your podcast feed. We want to make sure that you get all this stuff because it's top quality stuff. We are your favorite podcast. Guys, I want you to help me. I don't want to talk about random predictions. I want to talk about structural possibilities. We've talked a little bit about, Illinois, obviously, but are there some other teams that you think might either create problems for North Carolina or play to Carolina's strengths if the things fall right? And I'll let each one of you take one of these. So, Rob, I'll come to you first.
I mean, honestly, if they get through the first weekend, I will be matchup agnostic, because at that point, I think that eventually they will encounter someone who is able to exploit the absence of alpha talent on the team. I think that it's very clear they have personnel limitations right now. I think they have enough. I think they had enough to beat Clemson on a neutral floor. That's no excuse. I think they should beat VCU. Obviously, if Penn beats Illinois, that'd be fantastic, and we'll all be hoping for that to happen. I think the longer they can go without having to play a talented and accomplished P5 opponent, the better. But of course, that's asking a lot. And if they do proceed and they get deeper into it and they get Houston, I mean, hey, Houston's not Michigan. I still have PTSD. You mentioned that already, from Alabama 2 years ago. I don't want them to play a team like that plays at that pace, especially given the Heels' lack of depth right now. So if they were able to stay away from that team at least. So get by VCU, pull for a Penn upset. After that, Houston or whoever, I will be pleased, very pleased under the circumstances with anyone that they would play in the Final 16.
And again, you back yourself into the 6 line. You don't get to be, but so choosy. Sean, Sherrell, Sean, I'll let you take this next one. What do you feel like if there's a team whose style might play to Carolina's strengths, or is there somebody you really don't want to see? And I'll take away the top seed, because I think that's obvious.
Well, I mean, even going back to the run when as an 8 seed, I felt like the first round matchups were better, just because you had a Marquette team that would run and gun, and then you had a Baylor team that was the weakest 1 seed, where one of their top players had been injured, similar to Caleb Wilson, not at that level. But I mean, in terms of that question, to me, it's really if St. Mary's makes a run and upsets Houston, and you get a St. Mary's team in the Sweet 16 before facing a Florida team. But I think outside of VCU, yeah, to Rob's point, unless Penn makes it and TJ Powers makes another 44-point attempt against Illinois, it's going to be a rough game. I think it could have been a great game with Caleb Wilson in play, but they are the number one offense, and they do a great job of matchup hunting. And there's a lot of challenges in that game from just a shot making perspective that they do have. So with just how narrow the bracket is, I mean, it would take a lot with the St. Mary's as well as UNC getting to that weekend, because I think the 1, 2, and 3 for the most part are pretty set going forward, especially if I think what we saw last year with how NIL really probably taking out a lot of the upsets, that you'll see the NIL favorites advance being the higher seeds. Granted, there is probably a huge NIL disparity between UNC and VCU, so we'll see on that front. But St. Mary's would be the only one in my mind on that question.
Sherrell, I'm actually going to let you take a pass on this question because I want to get some more out of Rob before we get him out of here at the split of the hour. So Rob, I don't want to say which opponent changes the calculus for North Carolina the most, because I think you shared that when you went with Penn. Give me your honest feeling on how North Carolina, is there a way they win a second game in this tournament? I'll leave it that way. Rob Harrington, right now, putting the screws to you. Can North Carolina beat Illinois if they find a way to beat VCU?
I definitely think they can. I wouldn't favor them to do it. I think it would be probably about the same shot as Baylor 2022, but they beat Baylor in 2022 and should have beaten them more emphatically had the game been officiated correctly. But it's certainly possible. There have been much bigger upsets. Carolina has beaten good teams this year. That is what sets this team apart from last year's. Even away from home, yes, they were much better at home, of course, but they did win at UVA. They won at Kentucky. And so those are very quality wins, and they showed that they can do that. And yes, different player composition, but the guys know what it's like to win in those environments. You do have Veesaar, who is capable of giving you 20 and 15. And if the shooting comes through, I mean, it will always come down to, I guess, the team like Illinois that is just better than them. The shooting has to be there. They can't win with a 32% shooting day. I think they're just going to have to find their Brady Manick or have a spread allocation of Brady Manicks. But they have to have that type of shooting impact where you cash on your opportunities, because I don't think that physically they match up very well with Illinois. I think they have some problems, and they need to get Zayden High back playing better again. I mean, everyone who can step up a little bit would have to do that simultaneously. So it's not impossible, but they're in a very difficult situation, which we knew that they would be. It's not hopeless. The first game is so difficult that I can't even focus too much on that game yet. But certainly, I think and this will be my final comment before Greg gets here, and will be a teaser for later discussions. But I think going into the immediate offseason and portal season, the difference between Final 32 and Final 16 is even more important than it would be in another year. I think Final 16 would turn down the temperature some. If they go out in the first two games, especially the first game, it's going to be a very tumultuous and kind of ugly few weeks and possibly 12 months. So there are a lot of reasons, not just as a Carolina fan, but as someone who likes to watch a team and relax while you watch them, they need to get it done next week somehow, some way.
Yeah, that's that. I love that you called it a tease, Rob, because in the business, that's absolutely what we call a tease and a preview and a cliffhanger and whatever else you have. Rob, we appreciate it. We're going to wait for Greg to jump in here in a second, but
let me ask Rob one thing before he
Sure.
goes. North Carolina makes the Sweet 16 if blank player plays beyond what he did this season.
Luka Bogovic.
Okay.
I think it has to be Luka, because I think that he is the one who has creative shot making, and he was able to deliver a win against Clemson pretty recently, and I know he fell flat some after that, but I think he's the one with age and experience. I'd like to think I can't get there with Kyan Evans. 2 months ago I would have said Kyan Evans, but I kind of lost it with him now. I think it's too far gone. Bogovac still plays a lot of minutes. He still is able to get his shots in games, and I think so, and that's why I was sort of invoking the Brady Manick thing. I'm trying to manifest that one of these guys or some combination of these guys would do it. If it were one player, I think he would be the one.
Well, Rob, we appreciate you joining us, man. I'm going to kick you out of here and let Greg jump in, but we appreciate it, and we'll talk to you very, very soon. You guys can hear from Rob multiple times throughout the season. He's been doing the post games with Tommy. He does some other stuff. I think he shows up once in a while when Greg isn't here. But Greg Barnes is joining us now. He's the lead beat writer for Inside Carolina. He just got back from Johnny T-Shirt. So while I'm here, I want to mention Johnny T-Shirt. They are big sponsors of this year's show, big sponsors of all of Inside Carolina's content. They've been supporters of what we do, of UNC athletics, of the university for a long time. We want you guys to support them too. Tar Heels out in Berkeley this week for a baseball sweep. And I want to say they put that thing on Cal. Cal had come in red hot. North Carolina beat them, swept them, had 10 hits in each game. I think they only allowed like 5 runs over the 3 games in Berkeley. Again, it's the first time this team has been out to the West Coast, and Scott Forbes' boys just went berserk. Great starting pitching, all that stuff. But I say that because they're going to be back home this coming weekend, next weekend. Go buy Johnny T-Shirt when you're at the Bosch. Get some gear. You'll be glad you did. Use the awesome code that you can find on the message boards. And again, you can, if you see me at the Bosch, you can thank me. Greg Barnes is here. Greg, I appreciate how much you have followed this thing for a long time. I think there's a lot to discuss with how this thing came out, but I don't feel like there are as many WTF moments with this bracket as maybe there have been in the past. So, Greg, I'll ask you first: which seed line surprised you, and what signals did the committee send to the conferences about conference play this year?
Well, clearly the conference tournament matters. I mean, with Purdue jumping all the way up to a 2 seed line, when I would say they were probably tracking for closer to a 4, although I guess Keith Gill said maybe a 3. That kind of speaks to that. I know a lot of people have the idea that the conference tournaments just don't mean anything, and I think it's important that they do. I mean, if it's an event where your conference winner of that event automatically gets into the NCAA tournament, it should matter. And so I think that's a good thing. And I think it helped Virginia as well. I was a little surprised Virginia got a 3. I figured they were going to be a 4. But I think the way that they played to close the year and the way they played in Charlotte probably helped them as well. We always have this conversation about quality wins. And I think some of the quad talk maybe died down last year because of North Carolina getting in with a 1-12 Q1 record. But that topic came up again, with the bubble teams. And look, not to get on a rant, but the idea that we need to expand the NCAA tournament is laughable to me when we're talking about some of these teams like Texas and NC State and even SMU, being in Auburn, being in the conversation. And then, of course, Miami of Ohio, which I think Keith Gill completely botched that explanation. He had an opportunity to say, hey, wins matter. And if you go undefeated, that's worth something. And, of course, he didn't. And said they weren't the last team in, and then turned around and said, well, they actually kind of were the last team. So none of that was a good look. But in terms of, in terms of how the seedings went down, I think for the most part it played out pretty well. Now, I will say that if you go back, I mean, it's probably been, I think Hansbrough was still at Carolina when the NCAA got rid of the last 10 games metric that they used. If you look at NC State being one of the last 4 in, you would say, well, okay, maybe they did look at the last 10 games. But I'll give you 2 examples. One is Ohio State. Over the last month of the season, Ohio State has been number 8 nationally in Bart Torvik. And that's relevant because they play everybody who's watching this podcast favorite team, potentially the second weekend. That's who Duke's paired up with. So I think that's of note. So maybe if you do a last 10 games metric, maybe Ohio State seated a little bit higher than the number 8. And then the other thing kind of pertains to North Carolina and injuries, right? And since Caleb was announced being out on February 12th, Carolina has been the number 39 team in the country in Bart Torvik. So it gets into that conversation of, was North Carolina appropriately seeded? And I think you can have a conversation either way.
Man, I thought you were gonna actually just rip the jacket off and go full Ultimate Warrior on me, but you tempered it down a little bit. I guess you save all the rage for Tommy, which I'll take what I can get. Greg, I think one of the things that also everybody likes to talk about, everyone will say, what's the deepest region? But I want to ask you, and then I'll let the other guys chime in as well. Where do you feel like the committee just were total chaos agents and created complete anarchy in how they seeded things? Was there one of the regions that made you feel that way?
Well, I mean, pretty clearly to me, and I'd like to hear your opinion, but I think the East and the South are just brutal brackets, top to bottom. I think there's a lot of really good teams in those brackets. And then you get to the West and the Midwest, and you're kind of like, yeah, not necessarily. I mean, look at Arizona's stretch. Yeah. They may have to play, Wisconsin, who's on a tear with Nick Boyd. BYU's banged up. Gonzaga, I think they're good. I don't think they're great. Purdue, very good offensively. I have a lot of questions about them on the defensive end. You get into the Midwest, kind of the same thing. Texas Tech, I really like them with Toppin, but now you got, is Christian Anderson healthy? You don't have Toppin anymore. So in Bama, I'm just not impressed with Bama. Virginia, we talked about, maybe a little bit overseeded as a 3. Iowa State's good. I don't know that they're great. So it just seems like you're kind of destined to have Michigan and Arizona on that side of the Final Four bracket. But then when you get into the East, I mean, I mentioned Ohio State, that's going to be a tough game for Duke, assuming Ohio State gets by TCU. I mean, St. John's and Kansas as your 4-5.
That's the moneymaker right there. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if Duke gets to the Final Four, they're going to have to earn it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
I said the same. Well, I said the same thing about them going through the ACC tournament without 2 starters. I mean, say what you want about those guys, and this isn't a podcast about them, but whoever comes out of the East is going to absolutely be bloodied. Sherrell, Sean, are either one of you guys feel like there were some chaos merchants at play with the seeding?
Maybe not with the seeding, but the matchups. Just Clemson, Iowa is just. I don't know what we're doing there. Like, are we trying to?
That's a Sean
just
Moran
make everybody's
right
eyes.
There, buddy.
We're just trying to make everybody's eyes bleed on. Like, I don't even know when. I'm sure that's going to be like a 1 o'clock game on Thursday or Friday, and we just got to make it through it. We just all have to survive that game. So but it's kind of like when you have those terrible movies. Everybody's like, "Oh, you got to see this. It's so bad." That's how I'm going to watch Clemson, Iowa from an offensive perspective. Like, it's such a train wreck that I want to watch it. I want to see like 49-48 final score in the NCAA tournament. So like that might be my most anticipated game in the first round because of that lack of offense and just how those 2 teams play.
They should make that the very first game on Thursday.
Yeah, that way everybody has to watch it. Yeah, everybody's got to watch at least the first half.
Those first half unders on Thursday are a thing of beauty, so that would play right into it.
Listen to Shaw with informational purposes only. Yeah, Sherrell, I think I'm going to call that the Sharknado game because that absolutely reminds me of what you said about the bad movies that you feel like you have to see. Sean, do you feel the same way? Kind of that it's the East and the South, and then the other side is just milquetoast.
Yeah, I mean, I think going through the East, I at least found myself nodding my head of, okay, Duke is going to get through there, but they'll have to most likely earn it. But I think we said the same thing about UConn 2 years ago, and they got through their bracket of death pretty easily. I would like to see them matched up with St. John's as well as UConn and just see what, from a coaching standpoint, could be done. But yeah, I do agree. I mean, when you look at the, one, Joe, you talked about the 5-12s and even that Kansas Cal Baptist game, which was, I almost went to sleep on the West Coast before that game ended, and they won on a botched botched alley-oop in
Was
the
it the
WAC.
Utah Valley or whoever it was?
Yeah,
I did see that. It was terrible.
When I saw that they were a 13, I had to do a double take just because I figured they would have been more on the 15 seed line. I was just trying to go through quickly and see, are there some big upsets, which I think learned my lesson last year that those might be over, but do like North Dakota State, at least to look at against Michigan State. They were the top seed in the Summit, top team in the Summit. But yeah, in terms of the West or Midwest, especially the Midwest, that lower side, I'm not going to call it a cakewalk for Iowa State, but they have they have a good opportunity. And then same thing as what Greg was saying in the West. You go through from the 3 seeds outside of Alabama in the Midwest at the 4. It is pretty light, but crazy things happen. So I was just trying to go through the double-digit seasons and say, hey, are there going to be any that can make a little run? And I think it's hard off the bat, but I think Santa Clara, Kentucky is interesting. High Point to an extent again, but Wisconsin's been playing really well, and as I said, North Dakota State, but even Northern Iowa for a little bit, just because they're really strong defensively, and they've had their offense has come alive in the MVC. But yeah, the East and South are definitely on the tougher side.
So I want to bring this back to North. Go ahead, Sherrell.
I would say we got 5 or 6 teams in the East y'all think can make it to Final Four. You can. I don't consider
Probably.
Louisville, but I think there's 5. Yeah,
there's at least 5. I mean, 4, definitely 4, maybe 5. And I still think it's. Anyway, I'm not going to pick games.
Let's just look. Duke is Boozer's not losing. Let's just put it out there, and I'll go from there.
Full Pete Gillen. Certainly, Duke is Duke. All right, Greg.
But I will say, look, back in 2017 when both Carolina and Duke played in Greenville, I was down there. That place was absolutely rocking with Carolina fans pulling for South Carolina fans when South Carolina upset Duke. So not only did Duke get a difficult bracket, but I think the fact that Duke's going to have to deal with Carolina fans potentially on that second day when they may have to play Ohio State, that's going to be impactful.
But isn't that didn't Duke choose to play there?
They did.
I would assume. Yeah, I would assume they picked to play there, so it can't be that bad. Sherrell.
Let me ask you this then, Greg, and this probably is the harbinger of a bigger conversation that we'll have. But do you think Carolina fans are going to be all excited to be down in Greenville? Because 2016, 2017 is a very different time from now. So, I don't know that I expect this amazing UNC-based crowd who's going to, be energetic. It seems like, just anecdotally, it seems like there's kind of a resignation to what's going to happen over the next few days.
Rita from Chester will be there.
I think it's a great point, Sherrell, and I think it kind of speaks to what this offseason is going to be like. Because if Carolina fans who have always traveled well, they travel all over I'd say the world, but I mean, essentially you're talking about the Caribbean and Hawaii is the extent of the college basketball world. They travel very well to those places. If they don't show up in full force in Greenville for an NCAA tournament game, that will speak loud and clear to, I think, the administration. So it's that's certainly something to watch.
So I want to ask you, Greg, I want to bring this back to Carolina specifically. Yeah, I think North Carolina was what the 3rd 6 seed, but how does North Carolina stack up against the other 6 seeds? Or at this point, does it even matter?
Yeah, I mean, at this point, I don't think it matters. Here, I've got the seed list somewhere. I can pull it up. But one thing I did want to mention before we get too far along, I mentioned that last month what Carolina has done in terms of being 39th. The VCU during that same time, VCU has been 29th. And that's both the adjusted offensive efficiency and adjusted defensive efficiency. So VCU has actually been playing in terms of the metrics better than North Carolina has. So how much does that matter? I don't know. but I think it's a relevant conversation when we talk about where teams are seated and where Carolina's seated. In terms of the seed list, Rel pointed out there that Carolina's 22, but when you dive in closer, you got Louisville's number 23. Louisville's a team that's banged up. BYU's 24 on the seed list. They're banged up. And then you got Tennessee, I guess, is the other one.
So the six liners is the mass unit of seeds, is what you're telling me, Greg.
Pretty much. And I think everybody saw the statistic, if I can speak. I guess over the last 10 tournaments, the number 11 seed has actually won 52.5% of his opening round games against the 6 seed. So that's when you add in some of these injuries, that makes it even more likely. And why you're seeing some people like Seth Davis pick against Carolina, which I don't think anybody's surprised that Seth Davis picked against Carolina. Water
is in fact wet. And hey, I should point out the 6 seed is the second highest seed that North Carolina's had under Hubert Davis.
And the second highest since 2019.
Yeah. So
chew on that for a minute.
Throwing that out there. So I want to ask each one of you guys, and I'll let Sherrell start this. What version of North Carolina is the most dangerous in this field?
Same thing we said last week that we thought we might see against Clemson and didn't see. It is Veesaar. It's Trimble at the free throw line. It's the other guys hitting timely shots. If those things happen offensively, then I think, they have a chance to beat VCU. And I know people are going to recoil at the fact that I said a chance to beat VCU, but that's where things are. You have to accept where you are to understand where you're going. So accept it, don't fight it, move on. That's where it is right now. Defensively, I think it's, Jaron Stevenson. He has been better on the boards than maybe I probably ever expected, to be honest. So if he can continue that defensively and be that piece that they move around, then yeah, they can beat VCU. Now, that's the best version of UNC, and I still don't think personally the best version of this UNC team can be Illinois, even if all the UNC fans show up, if they beat VCU, if they're hitting their shots. That's just you guys were talking earlier about the worst possible matchup for Carolina, and Illinois is probably in the top 5 for me, including all the number 1 seeds, just because of the way they play their offense, and we've seen the struggles that UNC has had against some high-powered offenses this year. So again, it's Trimble relentlessly to the basket, is Veesaar, timely shots, Stevenson being a valuable defensive piece, and Stevenson rebounding.
Veesaar sounds like the worst version of the Brady Bunch I've ever heard of in my life. Sean, same question. What do you feel like is, the best version of this team? And if you want to run maybe a little more schematic angle than Sherrell did with regard to philosophy, I think that's fine.
Well, I think in terms of Veesaar, VCU has a talented big, but they're going to focus on him. I don't think that's any surprise, and make the others beat you. And I think the Clemson game was brutal to watch for the most part. And then all of a sudden they came alive the last 4 or 5 minutes. And I think they have to find a way to pick up the speed early on, so that even if they're not getting the offensive rebounds, that there's a little more pace to the team. And people are going to have to hit shots. So both Greg and Rob talked about Luka. So Luka is going to have to hit shots. Powell's going to have to be assertive off the bench. And to me, offensively, that they hit 11 against Clemson from a 3-point perspective. We talked last week, they probably need to be in that 10 range, but it needs to be more spread out. It can't be 5 in the last minute. So they don't have to match VCU from a 3-point perspective, but they have to hit early. This is going to be more of an offensive game than a defensive game. And we've applauded Hubert for a lot of the sets that he's run, and they just need to run. They need to be smart. Going throughout the game in terms of what they are running. Some of the Iverson cuts to get pick and pops. The high-low action, even with Stevenson, Veesaar, they just need to be quick. They've been playing together since August, September. This is the time to show it. But if there are struggles, the coaching staff needs to step in quicker than what they've been doing. So to me, it's just in terms of shot making, which has been very inconsistent. So it's kind of hoping we get that Sherrell 16 parlay from the spring and summer coming together from a 3-point perspective. And then defensively, I'd say the concern, what you brought up, Joey, is that quickness from a guard perspective. I think you can put Trimble on Hill, Dixon on Lewis. Probably a little bit of a mismatch on the foot speed, and if they're getting downhill, that's just going to open up their 3-point shooting as well. But in general, to me, it's going to be, you're going to see two teams, one with a first-year coach, Illinois, been there for a while, but two teams that have a philosophy and know what they're good at and how they play. And UNC, as we said, over the years, there's not really an identity. So that to me is what could cause this to unravel quickly, whether it's the first game or second game. But, if they are able to find an identity even for a short time, which they didn't against Clemson, that will be, the piece that has us talking next week.
I would argue that inconsistency is what North Carolina's identity has been under this coaching staff. And you saw it all in a matter of about the final 6 minutes against Clemson on Thursday night. All right, Greg, we talk a lot about variance on the show. It's one of Sherrell's favorite words. If I had my little bell queued up, I would ding that. But I want to ask you, what's the biggest variable or variance for this team from here forward?
Well, no, I think in terms of what this team needs to have success, clearly is Veesaar. I mean, we all know that. But I think Sean mentioned it, and Sherrell mentioned it too. I'm sure Rob has talked about it too. Guys have to make shots, and you got to get contributions from your starters. But really where Carolina had success once Caleb went out is you saw some of the bench guys really step up. Jonathan Powell had a really good game against Virginia Tech. Zayden High had a number of really good games. And just having some guys come in and maybe not give you a boost, but not allow for there to be a drop is significant. And when you lose a player like Caleb Wilson, obviously that works into your bench anyway. But what we've seen in the last two games is that North Carolina's bench has only scored 12 points total. I think Zayden High has got 7. Jonathan Powell hit a 3. And then Jaden Young hit a shot against Duke. And that's it. And the starting 5 is not good enough by itself to be able to carry the load. And I really think it's important. I mean, you can throw Bogovac in there, although I know he's a starter, of just guys that need to step up and really provide assistance to Seth Trimble and Veesaar. And for, I don't know, maybe 2 months, really through the West Coast trip, we had a lot of conversations about, okay, you got the big 3, Veesaar, Wilson, and Trimble, but that may not be enough. You need other people to step up. And now we're back to this situation where you don't have Wilson. So, yeah, you've got Veesaar and Trimble, but even if those two guys play really good games, and Veesaar was elite against Clemson, and it wasn't enough. But if those two guys play very good games, it won't be enough against some of these teams. And so it's going to be, we talk about the team concept of everybody pitching in. Well, this team has to do that. And so you can't have the variance. Everybody's got to pitch in. And if you don't, then you have the inconsistency and you have the lulls. And that's where Carolina's had a lot of issues this year and last year.
I mean, the obvious thing is the intensity, right? Like, I feel like every single game that this team has won, where they have looked their best, is when they've had a steady level of intensity. Even if they start slow in the first couple of minutes, they're not getting skull dragged by the under 16. And the intensity is just the fact that they can come out so flat against Clemson and don't feel desperate. The players' words, desperate, until, there's like 4 minutes left to go. I can't wrap my head around that. Greg, do you have any inclinations to if North Carolina can come out with some fire Thursday night at 6:50, which, by the way, I posted in the chat. But yeah, if you're listening to us before you see it, North Carolina plays at 6:50 Eastern time on Thursday evening.
Yeah, the conversation about intensity, and one of the reasons I wanted North Carolina to get one of these middle of the pack power conference teams as their 11 was for the fact that those teams are kind of sleepwalking too. But when you get a team like South Florida or VCU or even Miami of Ohio, I mean, VCU heard on the selection show tonight that had they not won their conference tournament, they would not be in. I mean, if you want bulletin board material, there you go.
I don't mean to interrupt you, Greg, but let me just add during that, look at Carolina last year. Seemingly the last team in, they heard it for 3 days and they come out and destroy a decent San Diego State team.
Right. For sure. And I think that's kind of the same setup. So VCU will be ready to play. I don't think there's any question about that. So Carolina has to come out with their hair on fire. The last thing you want to do is go into halftime and it be like a 1 or 2 possession game against VCU, because then you're going to be in a dogfight. And you like Trimble on Hill, but he's probably a better guard than what Carolina has, and it's the guard game in the NCAA tournament.
Right.
So,
Greg, last question for you. And I'm going to popcorn these last few to you guys, a little bit of word association. Greg, Rob felt like for a 6 seed, they got about as good of a matchup as they could have hoped for. How do you feel about that?
With VCU, yes. I think that it goes the other direction if they get by VCU, though. I agree with Sherrell. I think Illinois, they're big, they shoot lights out, and they rebound the offensive glass like Roy Williams teams used to. I think that's just a horrible matchup for Carolina. So, yeah, Carolina may have gotten a beneficial break in the opening round, but the committee did them no favors with that second round matchup.
Sean, I want to ask you, I'm going to say this, and I want you to tell me what it means for North Carolina. Matchup execution.
For VCU, it means being able to stay with your man, especially from a guard perspective, so that knowing each guy can shoot on VCU or likes to shoot, that they're not getting wide open threes. There's not systemic breakdowns defensively from the defensive philosophy, whether it's a drop coverage or switches. So to me, matchup execution is, especially on the defensive end, how do you guard against a three from a VCU perspective? If you get against VCU, how are you defending the glass against Illinois?
Love that. All right, Sherrell, your word association. Mentality.
Just find a way to win on Thursday and figure the rest out later. Like, they should not be thinking about Illinois. They should not be thinking about Saturday. They should be laser focused on VCU. Previous UNC teams, I maybe wouldn't have said that. More talented teams, better teams. They had the ability, the talent, just the resume to say, okay, we can go out and beat, X team with our C+ or B game. We're going to get ready for Saturday. This team has no margin for error. It's going to be a tight game. It seems like VCU, like everybody said, I'm not going to pretend like I watched a ton of VCU, but just from a matchup perspective, it seems like there's some things that they could exploit that have been exploited against UNC all year. So they just have to play like it's the national championship. Honestly, that has to be the mentality. Like, there's too often the last few years where it's a big game, Joey. Greg knows it's a big game. Sean knows it's a big game. But it seems like everybody except for the 5 people on the floor know it's a big game. And so they come out, they're lackadaisical. Ole Miss last year, just go back to their last tournament game.
Perfect example.
They were down. I mean, they had all this positive momentum from beating San Diego State. Everybody was saying, "Oh, sorry, Carolina, we were wrong. You belong. You should be in the tournament." And before you know it, they're down 20 points, and they have to do the false hope, go on a 21-2 run and run out of gas thing at the end of the game. Like, don't put yourself in that situation. My grandmother, Granny, rest her soul, she always said, like, don't put yourself in bad situations and bad things aren't likely to happen. So don't get down 15. Don't get down 20. Call a timeout if the run is 6-0 run. If they hit back-to-back threes, don't let it get to 11 or 12 or 15 or 18 before you try to stop their momentum. So, like, this is your national championship game. Treat it as such. That's the mentality they have to have, because this team doesn't have the cachet to say we can just kind of work our way through it and we'll figure it out later. They don't have that.
I mean, a wise woman once said, cook your greens early. I would leave that at the feet of the North Carolina Tar Heels as they are taking the floor on Thursday evening. All right, we're not picking games. I do want you guys one answer, one word. Tell me who your national champion is. Sherrell.
I thought you were gonna say like sleeper. I was prepared to say Georgia because I've watched a ton of Georgia. I like Georgia, but they're not going to win national championship. It's chalk, but I think Arizona just seems like they have a lot. The only thing I worry about Arizona is like if someone decides to zone them, can they hit enough shots? I
Can
mean,
they
obviously
shoot?
they'll kill on the boards. Like they'll out rebound anybody, but do they have enough shooting to sustain themselves for 6 games and win a championship? But they seem like to me the best team in the country. So
All right, Sean, who's your national champion? And since Sherrell did it, I'll let you give me one sleeper too.
I mean, you don't want to have to hear what I say. It's unfortunately
Michigan State.
Yep. Fortunately, going to be Boozer adding another championship to his resume, and it's going to be a struggle for all of us to watch it. In terms of a sleeper, I had North Dakota State, who I see as 16-point underdogs, but I mean, Arkansas is not a sleeper, but I could see them making a run just as a 4 seed, and then maybe UCLA, for a little bit just with how well Donovan Dent has been playing. Last one, first round upset, just because I don't think they're any good at all, but Troy over Nebraska. That could be one, even though the upsets will be struggling this year. But Troy would be one to look at, just given Nebraska, I think, is very overrated.
Yeah, I felt like Nebraska's been way gassed up all year. All right, Greg Barnes, I'm going to take the last word, but you're going to have the last answer for this one. Give me your national champion and give me one sleeper.
Yeah, I got Zona as well, just because I have questions about Caden Boozer running the show for Duke, even though they look good in the ACC tournament. I feel like not having Caleb Foster back is a problem for the Blue Devils. And I've got to go. I think the easy one's South Florida over Louisville. I think Louisville's kind of been a mess of late, so I think South Florida is a pretty safe 11-6 upset win.
All right, I love it, man. What the heck? I'll throw one out there too. I think it's Arizona's to win, but I'm not gonna lie. I think St. John's could actually make some hay if they're playing well. I like the makeup of that roster, and I have to say it because Sherrell's heard me talk about this all year. I am a huge Yaxel Lindeborg fan. Everything about his story and his game is so fun. So I'm going to enjoy watching him too. So I hope they're sticking around. But fellas,
Joey,
yes.
let me ask one more.
What?
Since we have Greg, let me ask one question, and then I'll be done. This is for all of y'all, so all 3 of y'all answer this. Who winning the title would be least harmful to UNC?
Oh God, UConn.
Houston.
Yeah, Houston probably.
Sherrell, you asked the question. You got to give us an answer, bro.
Oh, I was just curious.
You have to give an answer. We're curious.
Yeah, I think Houston is kind of that's one that everybody could kind of live with. I think.
Hey, shout out to Pembroke.
Obviously. Well, we know, yeah, and we know one of Kansas and Duke is not going to win it because they're in the same bracket, so that cancels out one of the other blue bloods. Kentucky is not going to win a national championship, so that cancels them out. So then it's like of the people left, who kind of doesn't harm UNC. I don't think UConn. I think Carolina would start to lose some traction as like in that ultimate blue blood conversation because of how the last 8 or 9 years have gone, and UConn's been so good. So I think UConn winning could actually be harmful to UNC, but Iowa State, Houston, I don't think any of them would really be harmful.
That's fair.
Or a Big Ten team winning for the first time, because
nobody believes you. Stop. All right, y'all. I'm grateful for you. I want to shout out to Rob Harrington for being a part of the show. Greg, thanks for joining us, man. Anytime you want to roll up in here, we will absolutely make space for you. For Sherrell McMillan, for Sean Moran. Shout out to Salvio's. Again, use the code IC20. Get your Salvio's pizza when you're watching the game Thursday night. Hit them up online. Appreciate Johnny T-shirt sponsor as well. But y'all, the bracket is set and matchups are known. Now the conversation moves from speculation to execution. It's win or go home. Carolina knows their opponent. They know what region they're in, and they know what challenge they've got in front of them. Let's find out and see what they can actually do. And then once it's over, we'll have some real conversations. But until next time, I am Joey Powell. This has been the Coast to Coast podcast for Inside Carolina. Y'all make it a great week.